What's up, guys? Zerda here, and today we're going to be looking at the most underrated fighters in the UFC, okay? So this isn't only going to be based on legacy or who you've beat. This is going to be based on, your striking. If you're an underrated striker, you're going to be on this list. If you're an underrated grappler, you're going to be on this list. Or if, let's say, everybody, the whole community is calling you overrated, chances are you're probably underrated. And if the whole community is calling you underrated, then you're probably properly rated or even overrated, so you might not be on this list. But let's start off with a perfect example of somebody who everybody loves to call overrated. Marlon Chito Vera in the S tier of the underrated list, because you have the whole MMA YouTube community thinking that they're special little cookies, and, they're the only guys who see that Chito's a flukester. I'm sorry, this Chito Vera fluke narrative needs to stop. Like, do you genuinely think that his win against Dominic Cruz was fluky? Or his win against Frankie Edgar was fluky? Why do you think it's fluky? Because he knocked him out? You're telling me the guy who, Frankie Edgar, who got knocked out by Corey Sandhagen before, you're telling me a guy who has insane power in Chito Vera wouldn't knock him out? Like, you wouldn't pick Chito Vera to beat Frankie Edgar again? That's what you're saying, because that's what you mean by a fluke. When you're saying it's a fluke, you wouldn't pick him to beat him again. So you're saying Frankie Edgar would beat Chito Vera. Okay, yep, he's going to beat Chito Vera. And then Dominic Cruz, even a better example, the guy who's been knocked down 3,000 times in his career and been knocked out by, Henry Cejudo. You wouldn't pick Chito Vera to knock him out. Okay, yep, good pick there, bro. You wouldn't pick Chito Vera to knock him out because, it was such an outclassing by Dominic Cruz before that. No, it wasn't. It was 2-1, and Chito Vera knocked him out. Okay, God forbid he knocked him out. It's like, it is insane to me because you guys, when it comes to Chito Vera, you want to see a point karate style where he's just pitter-patting and, got to beat him by strikes. No, this is a fight. If you knock the guy out, you are a clear winner, okay? So let me say this for an example. Let's say it's 20 years from now and you're a former fighter and you're showing your son a tape. Do you think your son's going to be proud of you because you won 3 rounds before Chito Vera knocked you the fuck out? Is that what you think? You think your son's going to be like, hey, well, at least he won 3 rounds, and then the guy obviously fluked it because he won the fight by knocking you the fuck out. If you're in a street fight and you get knocked the fuck out, you're the clear loser. They're not going to go to the scorecards and say, well, this guy actually got a couple of the scorecards before he got knocked the fuck out. So you can't call him a flukester because he's knocking people the fuck out, which is his style. Just say you don't like his style because it's low output, but I'm sorry. That is his style. That's how he wins fights. If he were robbing people left and right, then it would be a fluky win. But I'm sorry, the way he wins fights is by knocking his opponents the fuck out, because he has a power advantage usually, and he also has a chin advantage where he can take the shots, he can take the damage. It doesn't damage him nearly as much. The only time we've ever seen him damage was the Sean O'Malley fight. And also, let me bring this up. Here we go. We got Left Lane MMA, who I like Left Lane MMA, but this is the worst list I have possibly ever seen. When you're ranking, 20 guys above Chito Vera, this literally means he's not in the top 15. This means Chito Vera wouldn't be in the top 15. And I think a lot of guys agree with this type of narrative from what I've seen on YouTube. It's always the Chito Vera probably, I think he would struggle against unranked guys, honestly. Yeah, bro, he's already beat Rob Font, first of all. He's already beat Dominic Cruz. You got Peyton Talbot being ranked above him. You got Vinicius Oliveira, who got fucking dominated by Sopaj before he got that, that knee knockout, the flying knee knockout, right? Like, these guys haven't been tested. Jonathan Martinez, who, first of all, he got dominated by Jose Aldo, which Chito Vera had a competitive fight against. Chito Vera had a competitive fight against Jose Aldo. Jose Aldo won in the 3rd round by grappling. Literally fucking sitting on Chito's back. That's how he won the fight. Striking-wise, it was very competitive. It wasn't that competitive with Jonathan Martinez, so I just hate this shit, especially when you got Song Yadong. Oh, Song Yadong. Yeah, obviously you got to have Song Yadong in the elite level, who Chito Vera has beat. It was a robbery. Okay, let me pull this shit up. All of a sudden we forget about the Song Yadong versus Chito Vera fight. That's Chito Vera got clearly robbed in. But let's forget about that. That never happened. And also, let's act like Jose Aldo completely dominated him. Let's act like Jose Aldo completely dominated him, because that's what it sure looks like. And I'm sorry that I'm pulling up somebody else's record, but I'm sorry that fucking Chito got, the only guy who Chito has ever been dominated by an outclass, and I will give them this, is Sean O'Malley, okay? I know you're going to say Corey Sandhagen. Corey Sandhagen, bit of an outclassing. It was an outclassing, but it wasn't on the feet. It wasn't anything like extreme. And the only reason you hate Chito Vera, if you're one of these guys, is because he stole a single scorecard from Corey Sandhagen. God forbid he steal that single scorecard from Sandhagen. It's not like he robbed them. Did Chito Vera win that fight? No, he didn't win that fight. So why the fuck do you hate Chito so much because he stole a single scorecard from Corey Sandhagen and now we got to call him underrated? When in reality, he can compete with the elite guys. He has proven it. He is competitive with the elite guys. He's not one of these guys like, MMA Guru will love to say, I think I've heard him say this. He said, another example of Chito Vera not being able to compete with the elite when he fought Deiveson Figueiredo. When in actuality, the Figgy fight was very competitive, but the knockdown took away from it. And that's, I know that's ironic saying because Chito does beat a lot of his opponents by using knockdowns and using knockouts. So it's a bit ironic the way that Figgy won. But nevertheless, it was a competitive fight, right? Chito lost round 1 clearly because of the ground. Then in round 2, he came back in the striking and he beat Figgy in the striking. Round 3, he even outstruck Figgy, but, the knockdown, which, fair enough, give Figgy the win. Obviously, he deserves a win with the knockdown, even though he got right back up. But, I guess that's a complete outclassing, despite the fact that Chito got right back up, and he didn't take any damage from it. And, it's a complete outclassing, and Chito would lose to every elite guy. But, in reality, Chito is supposed to be ranked in the 10-5 range, but people want to say that he's not even deserving to be ranked. And, it is complete bullshit, this narrative that Chito doesn't deserve to be ranked at all, and Chito sucks because he loses to only to the elite guys. But dude, the thing is, Chito only fights elite guys. He only fights elite guys. So when you have Song Yadong, who we'll bring Song Yadong up and we're gonna put him in the D tier, you know why? Not because he's a bad fighter or anything like that. I think he's on the Chito Vera level, but the problem is people will toss him up in the A tier and the S tier without a second thought, right? They'll put him right up in the S tier and right up in the A tier, and they'll just say, yeah, obviously Song Yadong's extremely underrated. This guy's a beast. When in reality, this guy has only really fought 3 elite guys, unless somewhere in my brain I'm forgetting something. But he fought Chito Vera, who he lost to. He fought Corey Sandhagen, who he had a way better fight than Chito. I'll say that he had a way better fight than Chito, but doctor stoppage. And then he fought fucking Jan, and he lost to him. So what, in reality, how big of a difference is Song Yadong from Chito Vera? Because by the looks of it, when you got MMA YouTubers who make these lists, they'll toss Chito happily in the overrated list, and they'll say Chito doesn't deserve to be ranked. But Song Yadong, of course, Song Yadong's always in the top 5. He deserves to be in there. He's a beast. But in reality, these are the same skin. So just because one guy's being called underrated, I'm going to have to throw him in the D tier, even though he is underrated. But in reality, people are calling him too much underrated. When you have 1,000 people calling you underrated, and it gets to a point, you're no longer necessarily underrated. He's properly rated. If anything, he's hanging on to the D tier, because at this point, Song Yadong is properly rated, and he's looking, I know he's younger, so I'll give that to him, but in reality, dude, he's similar to Chito in the fact that he's competitive with the elite guys. He is competitive with the elite guys, but, the reason Chito's in the S tier is because people want to act like he would lose to half of the fucking bantamweight division ranked below top 15. So it's complete bullshit. But I actually like Song Yadong as well, so I'm going to say that. And I think that's a proper rating for, I think, D tier in terms of underratedness. It's still good. You're going to say D tier and think that means he's overrated. It doesn't necessarily mean that. It just means people have caught on to the fact that he's underrated, and he hasn't done anything necessarily completely to prove it to me that he deserves to be extremely underrated. This guy hasn't really fought too many of the elite guys, so I'm gonna toss him in the D tier for now. It's still a good rating, but let's move on. All right, next up we got Jailton Almeida, who I'm gonna throw in the A tier because, well, I'm going to throw him in the A tier because he is an underrated grappler, and he is an underrated fighter overall, in my opinion. This guy, he was on 13 fight win streak before the Curtis Blades fight where he got TKO'd, but he still looked insane in the grappling against Curtis Blades, who, everybody likes to talk about he's the big wrestler in the division. Curtis Blades is obviously the wrestler in the division. He could probably beat anybody in the wrestling and the grappling, but Jailton Almeida dominated him in the grappling, which was insanely surprising to see. And now I have kind of realized this guy is probably a future type of Max Holloway guy in the heavyweight division. I think that this guy is going to be similar to Volk versus Max, where he doesn't beat Tom Aspinall, even though he gives him a good fight, because I genuinely think Tom Aspinall, I think he would beat Jailton Almeida, but let me just say this. Tom Aspinall hasn't exactly had too many grappling exchanges in the UFC, or not too many, right, where it's been competitive. And I think that Jailton Almeida would be the most competitive guy with Tom Aspinall, because Tom Aspinall, realistically, he probably would KO him, but I don't know. Tom Aspinall doesn't seem like anybody would be giving him a threat in the grappling, other than maybe Jailton Almeida, just because of what he's done, bro. He submits people, and I know people love to say, he's boring, which he did have a boring-ass fight against Derek Lewis, and he continued it on to the Curtis Blaydes fight, so I was happy when he lost. But in reality, I genuinely think he is underrated, and I think people kind of want to, they like to call the boring fighters overrated. That's like a popular theme with these guys. They'll always say, the boring fighter's overrated just because he's boring. But in reality, it's because he's dominant that he's boring. Like, he's dominant on the ground. He's been getting submissions. He's been doing good, getting finishes, but he's just had a couple boring fights, which has shifted the narrative a little. But the only guy who I've ever really heard him say that he is elite, and he is, like, going to be, like, maybe a future champ, which I think is a little bit too much of a stretch. But I've heard Kenny Okoye say it, and I do have to agree with him that he is very elite, and I think he's going to be, like, the number one guy right below Tom Aspinall for probably a while. So we'll see about that. Hopefully this doesn't age too well. And also, guys, if any of these fighters end up losing their next fight or some shit, don't come in these comments saying, well, this aged well. It has nothing to do with who's going to win their next fight. I'm not predicting every one of these guys to win their next fight. I'm just saying they're underrated as of right now, okay? So let's move on to the next guy. All right, the next fighter we have is Ian the Cuck Garry, okay? I'm going to be giving Ian Garry his respect, and I'm going to toss him in the... Bro, come on. I'm going to toss him in the B tier. I'm going to toss him in the B tier because I genuinely think, as an undefeated guy, this guy is good, okay? I know you're going to say maybe the MVP fight was close, and then people are going to go to the extreme and say the Jeff Neal fight even. But it's been a bad look, right? Going to split decisions with your past two guys, I'm pretty sure, it's not the best look. But in reality, I do think he's underrated in that fact. Like, I don't think people would pick him to beat Shavkat. Probably wouldn't pick him to beat Leon. A lot of these guys, JDM. Like, I genuinely think people just look at Ian Garry and they think, like, he would lose to, like half of the guys in the top 10. And I don't think that. I personally think Ian Garry is a good prospect, and he probably will challenge for the title soon enough. And maybe even if we're living in, this reality where we are living, where Merab's the champ and, these guys who are a bit boring are the champs, I think Ian Garry will be the champ maybe in the future, okay? I'm not crazy to say that. And another thing why I think he's underrated is because he's able to mix it up pretty well, okay? Ian Garry isn't afraid to grapple with the striker. In my opinion, he has a pretty decent fight IQ, right? He is willing to mix it up and make it boring, which I know it's not great for the fans, but it's great for if he wants to stay undefeated and he wants to be, at the tip top of the elite level. But I think he does a good job, and he is a bit underrated because people love to bring up, the split decisions and how last fight was a robbery and all this bullshit, which isn't really bullshit when you look into it. But I just think that Ian Garry is a bit underrated because people won't pick him probably to beat Shavkat or any of these guys. And in reality, I think Ian Garry does a good job of mixing it up. He's developing his submission game, now training with Chute Box. He's able to, develop his ground game a bit. And I think he is actually a decent striker. I think he has a decent chin, and I think he is actually a good threat at the division. I think he's one of the better prospects at welterweight, and I won't be surprised if he does end up being a future champ. So I'm going to have to toss him in the B tier. I know we love to hate on him, and that's partially kind of the reason why I think he's underrated, just because people don't give him credit because they love to hate on him so much, myself included. But, at the end of the day, I think he's B tier, and we're going to throw a similar guy in the B tier who people love to hate on. Khamzat Chimaev. Now, I think Khamzat's in the B tier because people act like he's, a bot. People genuinely now act like he's not going to be champ or anything. I know 3 years ago or 4 years ago, people were saying this guy was going to be triple champ, which at that point he was obviously overrated. And I know people probably now are going to say, now that I threw him in the B tier, they're going to say, what are you talking about? Khamzat's overrated. No, I think he is underrated because I've seen a lot of guys who are genuinely going to pick Robert Whittaker to beat this guy because of his gas tank. They genuinely think, Khamzat has a bad gas tank and he's a bit overrated. I think the opposite. I think he's underrated. I think people are underrating his gas tank. I think people are underrating the Kamaru Usman performance a little. Granted, it was Kamaru on 2 hours notice, so I know it's not that crazy, but the fact that he was able to 10-8 Kamaru in the first round and just make him look stupid kind of on the ground, I haven't seen that happen to Kamaru before, and it genuinely surprised me. And I think Khamzat on the ground is insane, so I can't pick Robert Whittaker despite the fact that he has crazy takedown defense. I just think that we live in a reality where the guys who we don't want to win are going to win. And, as much as I want Robert Whittaker to win because I like him, I think Khamzat Chimaev is going to ragdoll him and probably beat him up, and we're going to, we're going to be complaining as fans. We're going to see MMA Guru making a cope video and shit, but in reality, I just think that it's too good to be true, and I genuinely think Khamzat's being underrated. People are underrating him a lot, especially because of the gas tank shit. That gas tank stuff where people are saying he has a terrible gas tank now. I'm sure he's working on that. Maybe I'm completely wrong about this because, dude, I also don't like adding, I'm saying Kamaru. I don't like adding Khamzat to my list just because he's genuinely almost not a fighter. Like, this motherfucker doesn't show up to his fights. He pulls out all the time. He's always sick. So it's kind of like I have almost given up on thinking of him like a fighter. He's not a fighter in my eyes, but for the purposes of this list, I'm going to add him to the underrated, to the B tier. And I think that's a pretty decent ranking. Let's move on to somebody who I mentioned earlier, Deiveson Figueiredo. I'm going to throw him in the B tier. The only reason why he's not higher is because people have been talking about how underrated he is now and how much he deserves a title. So I don't think he can be anything above the B tier. But in terms of a pure fighter and everything in his resume, he is insane, bro. Like, his resume is insane. The Chito Vera win, people are going to scoff at that, but that's a very good win, especially, he was competitive with Chito, but knocking down Chito was insane, okay? That was an insane moment. I'm going to give him full credit for that. He's beat Rob Font, Cody Garbrandt. Even his flyweight resume is insane. This guy's, like, in my eyes, he is clearly the second best flyweight of all time. And, dude, didn't he beat Pantoja? I think he's the only guy to beat Pantoja or some shit. I'm not going to fact check that. You guys can fact check that for me, but in terms of pure resume and in terms of ability to, at this old age win fights, I'm going to have to throw him in the B tier. And I kind of, Jose Aldo's not in this list, but if Jose Aldo were in this, he's almost like a Jose Aldo in my eyes, where the fact that he's able to win fights so late into his career is just impressive. And I think that it is very impressive what Deiveson Figueiredo is doing. And I wouldn't be surprised if he does, beat Peter Yan, but I'm going to be picking Yan to beat him. But still, like, at this rate, Deiveson Figueiredo is farming a fucking resume and a half. Like, he might be in my top 15 all time. I'm going to have to make a video on that, but he might be in, like, the top 15. I'm not surprised if he's in the top 20 for sure. But, dude, Deiveson Figueiredo definitely being underrated a bit, but not too much, because he is one of these guys where you do see a lot of people starting to call him underrated. But I think before the Chito fight even, people weren't talking about him enough. So, dude, especially after the Chito fight, now he has proven that he is definitely elite, even at 36 years old. Isn't he 36? Am I tripping? The next guy we're going to be talking about is Paddy Pimblett, who I'm going to throw in the C tier, because this is another guy kind of similar to Ian Garry, but the only thing I'll say is people are starting to recognize that Paddy Pimblett might be like a future lightweight top fiver, right? But I go further and I say that he's going to be a future champ when Islam leaves the division and, all that shit. But I think in the future he will be a future lightweight champ. Dude, I just genuinely think that people underrate him, and they like to look at the Jared Gordon fight, and they'll look at all these, they'll fucking go through, like, every highlight he's had, and just try and, like, find him getting wobbled, and anything they can find on him, they're gonna bring it up. But in reality, I genuinely think he has what he needs at lightweight. He's a pretty big sized lightweight. He has good, and I know people aren't going to like to say this, but he does have good power in my eyes. He did drop Tony, which, he dropped Tony or whatever, but that is impressive to drop Tony and almost fucking finish him in what? I think it was the first round. He almost finished him in the first round. And then to submit Bobby the way he did, he's the first guy to submit Bobby Green, isn't he? The way he did it was insane, bro. Like, literally a double submission. I think this motherfucker is going to be Moicano, Beneil Dariush, Justin Gaethje. Those are just a couple names off the top of my head that he could beat and make his way towards the fucking higher in the rankings and, get that title shot in the future. But, dude, tell me grappling doesn't bring you far at lightweight. It does bring you far, and the fact that Paddy Pimblett has this, elite level submission game and pretty good grappling, I think he is going to make it to that top 5 for sure. Like, he could beat Justin Gaethje right now, and I'm so fucking confident in that pick. He would beat Justin Gaethje. He would take him to the ground and fucking submit him. I am very confident in saying that. And there's still people who will call you crazy if you pick Paddy Pimblett to win a fight, but I'm starting to see more people calling him underrated, so I have to throw him in that C tier. But, dude, Paddy is underrated. Next up, we got Leon Edwards, and I know Leon Edwards kind of disappeared. People don't even talk about him now that he's lost to Belal, but I'm going to throw Leon in the A tier because, dude, as far as, like, resume and as far as how he's been looking, dude, I'm sorry, but he is A tier. He has to be A tier in the underrated list because people completely have switched up on him now, and they completely just forgot about him. But in reality, I think he is underrated now, especially after the switch-ups on him. But, dude, this guy... Granted, he did get dominated by Belal, but it was a closer fight than people love to like to admit. And I love Belal. I like giving him respect. I love giving him his respect. I am the #1 respect giver out here who gives respect to Belal. But, dude, I just think that the Leon fight wasn't too crazy. It was probably, Leon only won like 1 round or 2 rounds. But, dude, I genuinely think Leon beats everybody else at welterweight. And I think he beats Shavkat included. And I know that's going to sound crazy, but I genuinely think I was going to pick him to beat Shavkat if he beat Belal. I heard too many people saying that they're going to pick Shavkat, who, in my opinion, is overrated. If I made an overrated list, Shavkat would be pretty fucking high on there because, dude, wait, let me throw Belal Muhammad here too. I'm going to throw Belal in the C tier because, dude, people are picking Shavkat to beat Belal and they're picking Shavkat to beat Leon back in the day. So we're going to talk about both these guys, but dude, Leon, he beats everybody at welterweight. I'm telling you this right now. The fact that he's been able to beat Kamaru twice and Colby and all that shit, it's impressive, right? It is impressive. I genuinely think that people are underrating him a bit and people are kind of switching up on him. But, dude, he would beat Garry. He would beat JDM maybe. JDM fight's harder for me to say, but the Shavkat fight, I don't know why, but I'm just confident you would beat him. Which, similarly, I'm confident Belal Muhammad would be able to beat Shavkat. And people are underrating Belal, especially after the performance who he pulled off against the guy like Leon Edwards. Okay, Leon Edwards isn't somebody to scoff at. This guy hadn't lost in fucking, 10 years or some bullshit? Like, dude, Belal is insane. His resume is also insanely underrated. His domination. And, you'll get guys like MMA Guru who won't give him credit. Dude, I'm bringing up MMA Guru so much in these videos, but, dude, I promise I don't hate Guru. There's just some takes that I disagree with him on, and especially when it comes to, like, his Dagestani hate and grappler hate. Like, bro, Belal dominates in his fights, and the fact his resume is extremely underrated. He is extremely underrated with his resume, especially with the Leon win, bro. Like, I can't. People don't recognize it, but he is very underrated. But just because he's the champ and he's obviously shown that he is elite, I'm gonna have to throw him in the C tier. But like, underratedness, dude, this guy, if you're picking Shavkat, I'm sorry, I don't know, man. It's gonna be a bad day in my eyes. In my eyes, I think that Belal's going to be the underdog, as per usual, and he's going to fucking come out with that win. So, Belal Muhammad, you're going in the C tier. Let's move on. Yair Rodriguez. I'm throwing Yair in the A tier, bro, because this isn't resume-wise. This isn't necessarily, like, based on your resume or who you've lost to or who you've won, this specific one. This is based on striking. He is an extremely underrated striker, and people don't like to bring it up. People, they'll prefer to bring up how he lost to Brian Ortega, who Brian Ortega is also kind of underrated despite the fact that he lost to Lopez. Dude, Yair is also underrated, especially in the striking, bro. Like, the striking, this guy is an elite striker. If it were just pure striking, if it was just a pure striking game, I genuinely think he would be very, very competitive with the elitist of the elite strikers, because I have seen him be competitive with elite strikers before. Like Max Holloway. If you guys haven't seen the Max Holloway fight, it wasn't some pure domination by Max on the feet. It was a very close fight on the feet, and there's a reason why you had Max shooting for takedowns. Max Holloway was winning rounds because of the ground. He was going to the ground to win these rounds, and Yair was looking extremely good on the feet. He was hitting Max with extremely good shots, and I haven't seen Yair lose on the feet. Am I the only one who, I genuinely haven't seen Yair ever lose on the feet? The closest you can say that he ever, came to losing purely on the feet was the Max Holloway fight, which was pretty much 50-50 on the feet. And, dude, I honestly think Yair is extremely underrated. He is, a top 15 striker for me, for sure. And, dude, he can be competitive with anybody in the striking. The Volk, he made Volk shoot and fucking ground and pound. That's the only problem with Yair. He has no ground game whatsoever, but when it comes to pure striking skill, this guy is an elite level, and people don't like to bring him up. People just like to scoff at him. Like, when people were bringing up, the Brian Ortega fight, they were saying, Yair dropped Brian Ortega. That's embarrassing for Brian Ortega. Dude, Yair, getting dropped by Yair is not embarrassing. Yair is an elite striker. He could drop anybody. Bro, I'm telling you, Yair is an elite striker. He deserves to be in the A tier because people don't talk about him. Nobody talks about him. He deserves to be in the A tier. Next up, we're bringing up Henry Cejudo, who's going in the C tier, okay? Henry Cejudo, in my eyes, is pretty underrated. And I'm not talking about back in the fucking day with the DJ shit. I'm talking about kind of like a modern Henry Cejudo, in my eyes, is underrated because the fact that he was competitive with Merab, and he won the first round, and obviously the second, that's when it started to go downhill. It started to go downhill towards the second and third round. But, bro, Sean O'Malley, who is, ranked the number one striker. Everybody loves to have him at number one striker. Myself included, I had him at the number one spot. He couldn't even fucking wobble Merab or hit Merab clean in my eyes. He didn't hit Merab with anything that damaged him. Henry Cejudo wobbled Merab. Bro, it's insane. People underestimate Henry Cejudo and, his ability. He went to a split decision with Aljo. Very impressive. Very impressive in my eyes. Split decision at his old age. Like, he's old as fuck now, and he's still being able to compete with these guys like Merab, who's a different animal. Like, he stole a round off Merab, bro. How many people, like, think about this. How many people are winning rounds off Merab? But, like, you can't say Sean O'Malley. You can't say, oh, the 48-47, bro. It was pure domination. Like, it was pure domination. There wasn't a moment where you thought, oh, yeah, Merab's in danger right now. Merab's looking bad. There wasn't a single moment, even as somebody who wanted Sean to win and bet on Sean to win, there wasn't a moment where I thought I was confident in Sean and he stole that round. It was pure domination. Whereas Henry Cejudo, when he fucking went in there with Merab, he won round 1, and I was scared. I was like, what the fuck? Because I picked Merab to win. I was like, what the actual fuck, bro? Merab might lose this shit. And then he pulled off. But, dude, like, I'm telling you, Henry Cejudo is underrated. People love to call him overrated also because of, like, his whole, like, you know, fucking TJ Dillashaw, the weight range shit and all that. People love to call him a little overrated, which is another reason why he's kind of underrated in my eyes. But I'll throw him at the C tier just because he's not extremely underrated, but he's in the C tier in my eyes, okay? And we're going to bring up Aljo as well. We're going to throw him in the B tier because he gets a lot of hate. I know not so much anymore necessarily now that he's moved up to featherweight, but people love to hate on him and love to hate on his resume and love to hate on, you know, all these things. But, dude, this guy... he's a good fighter. He is a good fighter, and I see this guy probably beating Movzar. I don't know if I'm the only one. I see him beating Movzar and probably ends up fighting for the belt just to lose to Topuria, but he's going to fight for the belt. And I think he's underrated in terms of, you know, people throw away his legacy and act like it's all a fucking fraud because he cried to win the belt off Peter Yan. But, dude, he did beat him in the rematch. He beat TJ Dillashaw, one-arm TJ, but, dude, that's not his fucking fault. That's not Aljo's fault. The Henry Cejudo win, it's impressive, even though you're going to say it's an old Cejudo, but look at what old Cejudo's doing. Like, old Cejudo, I put him on the underrated list for a reason, okay? And I think Aljo, he's starting to get more respect, but people still will scoff at him, and they'll say, you know, Aljo's boring. And it's a similar situation where it's because he's boring. People will just, like, scoff at him and call him overrated and say, you know, his whole legacy is fake. When in reality, dude, especially, like, think about this. Corey Sandhagen. He beat Corey Sandhagen. He subbed Corey Sandhagen. Nobody had done that to Corey Sandhagen, really, before fucking Umar. Umar was the only guy who's, like, made Corey Sandhagen look fucking stupid. But, dude, Corey Sandhagen subbing him is impressive. I'm sorry. It is impressive. So, you can't just throw Aljo's legacy out the fucking window because he's had, you know, some fights that weren't even his fault. Like the TJ Dillashaw arm situation, that's not his fault. That's not his fucking fault. Okay, so, dude, like, in all seriousness, I think Aljo is underrated, and I'm going to throw him in the B tier. Let's move on to our second to last guy. Second to last guy is Jan Blachowicz, who, dude, I wanted to put him in the A tier. But I think you know where he's going now. He's going in the B tier. Jan Blachowicz, let me move my camera. Jan Blachowicz, listen, Jan Blachowicz is, in my eyes, he's like an A tier, but the problem is people already know he's underrated. People call him underrated all the time, but, dude, he's the only guy at light heavyweight who's, like, been competitive with Pereira. He's the only guy who, in a lot of people's eyes, won the first fight against Pereira. Or, the first fight? He won the fight against Pereira. Like, a lot of people thought that he won the first fight against Pereira. And the thing that people, you know, don't realize is that, dude, Jan is very fucking intelligent. His fight IQ is very high. He's underrated. He's an underrated striker. He also is an underrated grappler, I have to say. He is underrated grappling. And I just think that people, they won't even talk about Jan Blachowicz. Not a lot of people talk about Jan Blachowicz unless you're going to the real hardcores. Obviously, like me, I'm a fucking real hardcore. But, dude, in reality, I just don't think many people love to talk about Jan Blachowicz and his ability to, at this old age, similar to Henry Cejudo, pull off fights and look competitive against guys like Magomed, who's the boogeyman. He's the boogeyman, right? Everybody loves to think that Magomed's going to run through Alex, which I personally don't think he is, but he is an elite guy. Like, Magomed is insane. His resume is insane. And many people would even call Magomed underrated, but the fact that people call him so underrated, I don't think he can be on an underrated list like this. But, dude, Jan Blachowicz winning rounds against Magomed and drawing with Magomed is very impressive, especially at his old age, bro. Like, I don't know why. I'm not the only one. I know this shit. I'm not the only one who thinks it's impressive and who thinks Jan Blachowicz is underrated. But, dude, I genuinely think he's going to be a fucking hard matchup for guys like Yuri also, who Yuri is, like, one of my favorite fighters. But I genuinely think that he would be a hard matchup for Yuri. And if that fight gets made, I'm going to be praying for Yuri because I think, dude, Jan is like a crafty vet. Like, you know, Lucas Tracy used to say he's a crafty vet. He is a crafty vet. And people give him his credit now, but Still not enough. I'm throwing him in the B tier of underrated. And let's move on to the last guy, who is, this is a bit of a meme pick, but guys, Aleksandre Topuria. Aleksandre Topuria, I'm going to throw him in the C tier of underrated. And I know the Topuria name, you know, it's adding value to him. But guys, this guy, he's going to be making his debut soon. I don't remember when. Is he making it on 308 with Topuria? But I don't know. Dude, Ilia Topuria is glazing this guy up. He's talking about how this guy's better than me, bro. And, you know, you go on to Tapology or any of these things, and you see that Aleksandre Topuria has lost. So unlike his brother Ilia, who's going to be a future GOAT, he has lost. So that you know, you got to look at that. But in reality, that fight was like, what, 2015. So Aleksandre Topuria's only loss was 2015. And since then on, he's been on a fucking tear. He's won like 5 fights or some shit. And he's getting signed by the UFC into the bantamweight division. And I genuinely think this guy is somebody you need to look out for. And people are maybe saying, you know, because he has a loss, they're gonna overrate him, and they're gonna say that, or they're gonna say that he's overrated. Not overrate them. And they're gonna say that he's overrated, and they're gonna say, well, this guy's lost. This guy's probably sucks compared to his brother. But I think that Aleksandre Topuria is somebody to look out for, and that's just going on pure will or pure word. That's going on pure word from Ilia Topuria, and I think he's somebody to look out for. So, you know, Ilia Topuria's brother, Aleksandre Topuria, definitely in the C tier of underrated. Future bantamweight champ maybe. Future bantamweight champ maybe. And I definitely think you should look out for this motherfucker. But yeah, that is it for the list. Let me know if you disagree with anything in the comments. Chito Vera, dude, I could make a 50-minute video on Chito Vera. Literally an hour. I could make an hour-long video on how Chito Vera is underrated. Because in my eyes, he is one of the most underrated UFC fighters. And you can't disagree because you call him overrated. So if you're calling him overrated, I mean, and he's really not. I mean, I could literally yap about it for an hour. But, dude, Chito Vera is not overrated. And bedtime, I love you. But, dude, you've done irreversible damage to us. You've done irreversible damage to the Chito fans. It's very hard being a Chito fan and having to defend him all the time because, you know, everybody thinks he's a bum, which he's not. He's a fucking great guy, and I love him. But, yeah, let's end the video there. That's it for the video. And, yeah, leave a like, subscribe, comment, whatever. I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.